We are the river people. That's what we call ourselves, because those were the highways. You know, we dog teamed it in the winter, and was all with canoe and portage in the summer, and they traveled phenomenal distances. So the relation that we have with the rivers is very dear to us, you know, and I hear the old people talking about water and the rivers. Chapleau Cree is made up of, I guess, around 430 band members. Probably 150 live in the area, and the others live elsewhere. We had an old reserve down on the two rivers there, at the point of the two rivers, the Kapuskasing and the Kapuskasing River. It was uninhabitable. Nobody could live there. So we got this reserve here. It's very close to Chapleau, which is good for infrastructure. And we've been here since 1990.
Originally we were on Missinabie Lake, and we were displaced from that area in 1925 when they turned this area into a game preserve, Chapleau Game Preserve. So our community members were kind of scattered along the rail line, Peterbell, Elsas, a number of different other areas. And in 1947, we finally got a township to call a reserve. Mount Batten Township was given to us. And we had a village there, and that's also along another rail line here. And so our community members, our parents and grandparents used to go in and out of Chapleau on the rail line. In 1972, we traded off this piece here for a piece where we're standing right now on Highway 101, just to be closer to Chapleau for services and stuff like that. And so that's how we have the three different areas that we kind of call our traditional territories. So with that, there's like burial sites, there's heritage sites, there's a number of different systems and waterways that we've used in those areas.
Prior to European contact, the people were very strong, and I believe that it was a very definite plan on the part of government to strip them of everything so that they became weak, because it's very hard to work with strong people. And the first rule is, when you're going to take over a country, is you have to remove the people from the land. And that's what they did. They removed you from the land, they put you on a reserve. Take the children, we'll put them in residential school. We'll take your language, your culture, your spirituality. You can't forget that, you know, Indian people couldn't even vote before 1960, you know. They weren't even a citizen of the country. And I don't say dwell on the past, but you certainly have to never forget that.
Treaty 9 forms the basis of our relationship with the federal and provincial governments. So, you know, it's a legal document. It spells out certain rights and privileges that we have as Aboriginal people here in our territories. And our interpretation is one of sharing not only of the reserve land, but sharing of our territories with the newcomers. Now, of course, it's been a bit of a one-way story for the last, you know, last couple hundred years, but I think, you know, in our view, the treaty is starting to open up for us.
What a treaty is it's a binding agreement between two sovereign nations on how they can coexist. The land was never surrendered. We're fully aware of that. And to me, it's not about ownership. You know, Indian people aren't about ownership, it's about sharing the land. And that was the full intent of the treaty, to share the land. And the word in Cree, aski, is land. It's all about the land for us. You know, the red man's gift is his stewardship to the land. You know, we're all here to protect the land and the water. You know, we think 7 generations ahead. We should all be thinking that far ahead, you know? We shouldn't be thinking about, you know, the short-term gain.
As far as the line between protection of our environment and the harnessing of the resources in our environment, it's a difficult question. I mean, we know that we can't go back out in the land and do what we used to do years ago. That's not a lifestyle that's going to be sustainable for our people. You're not going out and being a hunter and gatherer in 2012. To sustain in today's economy, you've got to do certain things that might go against the grain of traditional beliefs, like protecting the landscape and protecting waters. But the alternatives are not something that I think the communities can stand in terms of, continued social pressures of the community, the suicides, the substance abuse. We've got to get out of that cycle, and the way to do that is to utilize our resources, our land.
Ultimately, our goal and our destiny is to be self-governing. But to be self-governing, you have to have an economic engine. And the economic engine that we have is the resources on the land. But having said that, we can't abuse them. For me and Native people in general, I can say that it's all about doing it in a very respectful way and having as little impact on the land as possible, as small a footprint as possible. It's our territory. We will look after it. You will ask permission to do something on the land, and if it's culturally and environmentally friendly, we'll consider it. But ultimately, if it's harmful, it's a no-brainer for me. It's not going to happen. The way we like looking at stuff is, as it comes up in the meetings, when there's an issue that comes up, well, we take that, we write that down, we bring it to the community, we discuss that at our community membership meeting, we see how everyone feels about it, and then if it's something that we think we can go ahead with, we will. If there's something we think we need some parameters around, we can implement, we'll implement those types of actions. And we want to make sure that nothing gets impacted or devastated to the point where we can't do a project.
People naturally came to rivers, first for transportation, then for things like log driving, thereafter for grist mills and local electricity or mechanical generation. And water power really was the economic engine upon which the prosperity of Ontario was built. Up until 1951, all of our electricity came from falling water in this province. We moved through the 60s and 70s to other forms of generation, notably coal, and then to nuclear generation. But Ontario's hydroelectric fleet is still the backbone of our electricity supply. And if you look forward, as we move to getting away from coal-fired generation, incorporating other forms of renewables like wind and solar, the role of hydroelectricity is only going to increase in importance.
In the late 1990s, the provincial government started looking at expanding water power in Ontario. So they were looking at a new water power policy. They wanted First Nation input. We saw it as a big opportunity for our communities because there are a number of rivers in our territory of the size that they were talking about, run-of-river projects that don't do storage where you're flooding lands and kind of meet with our philosophy on development. So we were one of the ones that jumped on the opportunity to have input into the policy.
The Ministry of Natural Resources first introduced its water power site release policy in 2004, and some main objectives of that policy were to create economic opportunity for Aboriginal communities, to create new opportunities for business-to-business relationships, and to try to realize some of the potential that water power has to contributing to sustainable development in Ontario. The projects on the Kapuskasing River were some of the very first to be developed in Ontario. Ministry of Natural Resources is making the sites available to be considered for these kinds of projects, but as well, M&R has a role to play on the regulatory side in terms of approvals and review and permitting and those kinds of environmental approvals, and that's mostly been done through our regional offices.
We have to consider many things when going through a planning process for hydro development with regards to striking a balance between the social and cultural needs, between the economic needs for proponents to produce power, and as well as to meet the needs of the ecosystem. So what we do is go through a series of processes in which we want to understand what we have. So we look at the physical characteristics of a river system. And then we look at what are the flow and level characteristics of the river system. Traditionally, throughout many years of information, and on an interannual basis. And from that perspective, identify what species and communities have established themselves within this system, and then try to plan to incorporate the needs for those ecosystem components to try to ensure the sustainability of that resource.
The Ontario Waterpower Site Release Policy was initially done. When they announced that, they said this site is immediately open for taking up, so to speak, and a competitive process was started by the government that involved our input in part of the selection process.
The second step of that, of course, is going to find the proponent, the right partner, the right people to develop it with the First Nations principles in mind. And the principles that we hold as communities here is, especially in hydroelectric development, is that we need to own them. We know that the assets are multi-generational, and the revenue stream generated from these kinds of facilities coming into the community for the next 100 years. So that was really one of the core principles that we brought to the table. And it took some time to find them. I mean, not everybody's got the same ideals when you look at companies. A lot of them want it all, you know, and offer, you know, the shiny bead sort of scenario where it's very minimal participation by the communities. We had a couple of partners that didn't stomp out of the door, but they weren't here very long. They offered a couple % in the project, and we said that's not good enough, and they left. And finally, you know, ended up with a private sector partners, which is Hydroméga out of Montreal, who really understood that, yeah, you know what, it is First Nations land, and if it wasn't for these folks, I wouldn't be here, and without them, I can't develop this project. So we better sit down and have an open and honest dialogue about how we can build this thing together, because we're going to be, if we're going to do this, we're going to own this thing together for, you know, perhaps 100 years.
My name is Philip Lowy, Director at Hydroméga Services in Montreal. We are a renewable energy company. For the last 25 years, we've remained one of the few private independent power producers in Canada. We submitted a proposal that was reviewed by the MNR in conjunction with the local First Nation communities, and our proposal was selected.
We were not the only developer they met at the time back in 2005, but I remember clearly meeting with Jason and Sean in Timmins back in 2005, and the message was, you know, very clear about being, you know, partners and real partners, being involved in the ownership of the hydropower development, and that's something that I think Hydroméga, you know, since day one, and that from that meeting we embraced. We looked at it, how the way the program was structured, and think that it was possible.
When I first got engaged with Hydroméga, I found them really, really cooperative. That was the first company that I dealt with. They came to me. They were very polite. They showed us the project. It was as green as you could get. There was no cement dam, which I liked. There was no big backup reservoir of water, no flooding. I had little impact on the land, and I thought this is good, you know? And we should all be going greener, and we should all be looking for ways to develop, yes, but to be very respectful as possible to the mother.
The Kapuskasing River project is a project that's being put together through the efforts of relationship building within the three communities that are on that project. And over the years, we've gotten close to each other because of the meetings, because of the same similar situations we've all been in, and that we have to struggle and get out of. And so that's kind of put in perspective that a lot of these projects in these areas, in these shared territories, it's beneficial to everybody. And if we can work out arrangements and agreements to make a partnership on these, we see that as the best way of moving forward. For economic development, what I see, I don't see profit being a big thing for us. I see job creation, sustainability, longevity type projects. And also, you know, the revenue stream that does come in is going to help in areas of infrastructure, in areas of capacity development, training and stuff like that for our community members.
I think it's certainly fair to say that the approach to the involvement and engagement of Aboriginal communities has changed over time, as has society's approach to the engagement and involvement of Aboriginal communities. I think the fundamental conceptual framework that has evolved over time has been one of answering in the first instance the question of whether Aboriginal communities should be part of development considerations, to one now that I think is of how and how best. Even in the recent past, the question in answering that question was a question that was probably premised on the Crown's duty to consult Aboriginal communities and accommodate Aboriginal communities, and the proponent's role in carrying out some of those responsibilities. This is quite different, and it still includes those important criteria, but it goes beyond that, because what we see here and we're seeing elsewhere is those three communities in partnership, and I mean economic partnership, business partnership with Hydroméga, bringing that project forward. And so those communities are equity partners in the project, right? They're not just consulted in terms of the potential effect on their interests or their Aboriginal and treaty rights. They are partners in the project. And that's a new business model in hydroelectricity, and I think it's one that's spreading across the province in our sector and in other sectors.
This year we celebrated our 90th anniversary as the municipality of Kapuskasing. This actually, before Kapuskasing came into being, was a rail stop known as McPherson. In the 1920s, the New York Times and Kimberly Clark became involved in a joint venture to construct a newsprint mill for supplying the New York Times. And at that time it became necessary to construct a town site. And then they changed the name to Kapuskasing. Kapuskasing is an Indian word for bend in the river. And we have been predominantly a forestry and newsprint economy. Something, though, that has been consistent in our economy and was a necessary component of running a newsprint operation of this size is power generation. And when the company constructed the mill site, they also constructed a dam at a location called Smoky Falls. And that was necessary to supply power to the mill, which is a very power-intensive process in manufacturing newsprint. They also have a small power plant located right in the community, in the bay of the river, and it was more to take advantage of the natural water flow that was here and at the same time help operate the mill in the town site. The province of Ontario offered a number of water sites available for developing power projects. And Hydroméga was the successful bidder. They were successful because of their generosity, if you will, or accommodation of First Nations in the inclusion of their project. They also came to us just really explaining their project, because it was at a time when I believe they genuinely wanted to make sure that there was community awareness and acceptance of the project. And I think it's significant to note that when the community benefits, a large number of residents benefit. It's far different than a private sector venture where really your motive is profit for yourself or your shareholder. My shareholders are the citizens of Kapuskasing, and that'll change over time, but the community will always be the benefactor of this project.
So when Hydroméga proposed the initial proposal for 2 structures on this river system, we, the Ministry of Natural Resources, looked at what the potential impacts would be associated to those developments. We realized that we were not looking favorably to having a diversion that would take water out of 1 kilometer of natural riverbed and have it diverted overland. So Hydroméga went back to the drawing board and came back with a new proposition to develop 4 generating stations with a generating capacity of 5 megawatts each. They would all be very similar in structure, in which it'd have 2 generators for a combined output of 5 megawatts at this location and at the other 3 locations upstream. The net result would be an increase in power generating capability, but at the same time, a reduction in the ecological footprint upstream and the elimination of a long bypass both here and at a further upstream location.
When we met Hydroméga in 2005, they sent one of their top guys here, Stéphane Boyer, and Stéphane brought the message that, look, you know, Hydroméga is a small company. I'm going to take you to meet the president and the CEO, and you know, they're just kind of homegrown guys, and we want to make a deal with the communities where you're going to be an owner of these facilities.
A project, they always evolve. You start them with an initial preliminary design, and then you acquire more information. You go on the field. You start your environmental assessment. You get your technical information, geotechnical. You go and walk the site, and then you improve your design to make four sites instead of 2. That also allowed to reduce the size of the dams, the heights of the dam, and make it a more simple projects with identical facilities. If it would have been just 2, they would have been, you know, totally different. I guess it also kind of simplified the ownership. First Nation, Brunswick House, and Chapleau Ojibwe just, you know, got the first 2 because the 2 First Nation, and then the Chapleau Cree got involved in the 3rd project, so that's great. And now the town, you know, is part of the 4th project, so it's really worked well with 4 projects.
Right here, what you can see is the mean average water level. But when the powerhouse will be in operation, the water level will raise about 2 meters, and we're going to be clearing the trees for the head pumps. We should be online by the end of the year for Big Beaver and Can 3, and by the beginning of next year for White Otter and Old Woman.
Well, you know, I'm pretty proud of what we've accomplished here in terms of the engineering, the construction, the project itself, and you know, the benefit that it's going to provide to the First Nations that are, you know, owners of this facility, and the ones upstream. And so, you know, for that part, we're really excited to see how far we've come, and you know, excited about the electricity itself that's going to be generated. On the other hand, you know, when I look around and I see how we've changed the lifeblood of Mother Earth, and how it's forever going to be altered by what we've done, and what I personally supported over the last number of years, it's difficult. It's really, you know, heart-wrenching to see the way that we've, you know, created this damage, if you will. But you know, at the end of the day, it's about choices. And for our First Nations, you know, they have to live in this modern world too, and in order to do that, they have to be involved in facilities like this. You know, we have to send our kids to school. We have to have health and education as a priority on the communities, and we have to pay for that. And by participating in projects like this one on our land, that's what allows us to do that.
In general, the quality of life is improving. I think the days of old are gone, and the days of new of talking and doing things together are here. Yeah, so this is our community center, where we have after-school programs, breakfast clubs in the morning for the kids. We had a birch bark canoe project training a couple times. So this is our newly constructed health center. This is our sweat lodge area. This is our place of worship. This is fairly new for us over the last couple of years, I guess now. We've lost a lot of tradition and a lot of culture that's just now coming back. Language is another thing that we're trying to get a program going for, to bring that back as well. Yeah, this is something that's put together as well to help the youth, especially, I guess, to re-identify who we are and practices and ceremony, and also to kind of get them away from the Western influences that are out there, especially drug abuse and stuff like that, and not being in school.
You know, if we're going to claim that we're traditional, then we have to be traditional, and traditional means grassroots up, the people up, never top down. It's got to be the people, it's got to be about the people, and it's got to be about community, and it's got to be about developing not only your economic development, but developing yourself as a human being. So it's very important that we bring back our culture to the people to make them strong again, and I see it coming back. I'm very happy with that.
absolutely everything we do is with our culture at the core. Preserving our language, preserving our ways, creating and keeping our ties with the land. And I would say at this point it's recreating, a lot of our ties with the land, because a lot of it's been destroyed. So it's, part of the success that we see on these commercial enterprises will give us the ability to go back and recreate much of our culture, to recreate the ties to the land.